So today's reading is from Matthew 5, verse 13 to 16, and that's on page 969 in the Bibles in front of you. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone on the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven.
Great, thank you very much, Catherine. And we're going to spend a bit of time looking at that. So it'd be great if you could have the Bible open in front of you so you can make sense of what I'm trying to say this morning. Let me just say, as I start, there is nothing complicated that I'm going to say this morning, okay? It's really simple, but living it is both hugely exciting and massively challenging, okay? So that's to set your expectations. It's all just going to be based around two very, very simple pictures drawn from everyday life, salt and light, part of all of our lives, not complicated, but challenging. And to be honest, if we take it to heart, our everyday lives will not be the same afterwards. If we take it to heart, what we do with our time and yes, our money won't be the same afterwards. If we really take it to heart, our whole vision for what the church is about won't be the same afterwards. So I just want to ask for a little heart check before we begin. For every one of us here, whether it's your first time or you've been here loads of times, are we up for change? Or is church about just trying to leave our lives unchanged and make them a bit more comfortable? There's a big challenge for us from the lips of Jesus this morning. My friend Richard Fountain has just got a new job. He's just taken over as head teacher of St. Faith's Primary School in Winchester. Well done, Richard. He might even be here somewhere. Now, I would love to just go into the staff room of Richard's school, incognito, when he's not around, and just quietly listen in order to find out from the kind of staff room gossip what life is now like at St. Faith's with Richard in charge. How's it changed? What's going on? I'd really like to know. You might like to know that as well. It'd be interesting, wouldn't it? But you know, that is kind of the idea at the heart of this bit of the Bible that we call the Sermon on the Mount that we're looking at for a little while in church over the next few weeks, Matthew 5 to 7. The heart of it is asking this question, not what is a school like when a new head teacher comes, but what is life like when God is in charge? What is life like when God is in charge? That's what the Sermon on the Mount is all about. Through the whole of this sermon of Jesus, he's talking about something called the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God. And before we misunderstand, that's not a piece of geography, it's not a place. The kingdom of heaven is about God's reign breaking into human lives and human history, changing them to make them what he created them to be. So it's about God stepping in and taking charge. And the whole of the sermon is kind of painting a picture of what it's like when God does that. When God steps in and takes charge, what is life like? This is like a manifesto for life, but with God at the center. And the key message for today is that when God does step in and take charge of our lives, we change, we become different, and so we make a difference in the community and the society around us. Being different, and so making a difference because our lives are now centered on God. And when we talk about being different and making a difference here, we're not just talking about little things on the edge of life, you know, whether you take paper clips from your employer. I mean, please don't take paper clips from your employer. But to be honest, the kingdom of God, the inbreaking reign of God isn't just about paper clips. It's an awful lot bigger than that. It's something that affects the whole of life, every bit of life. And God's reign breaking into our lives is an incredibly powerful reality. We are not talking about a little religious top-up to otherwise unchanged lives. We're talking about an encounter with God that literally changes everything about the way we live and what we're looking for in life. It's big stuff. Earlier this week, I had breakfast with a Christian entrepreneur. He had a vision a number of years ago to create jobs in one of the poorest ex-Soviet countries of Eastern Europe, probably the poorest actually. Several years on, that company, which he felt God led him to create, now employs over 6,000 people, creating properly paid jobs for 6,000 people in some of the poorest countries in the world. Phenomenal impact. It's amazing to hear his story. I met another person during the week who talked about her table. It's a guy actually, his table. His table, simply the impact on people's lives of opening his home to young adults and saying, come, sit around our table, let's do life together. And he's seen lives transformed through it. I heard about another person whose company was going through some painful restructuring, and he had to make some hard decisions about his team because some of them had to leave. But they fed back to him afterwards, including some of the ones that had to leave. He's a Christian. And they said, thank you so much for looking after me. You're a great manager and a great person. Thanks for your support and your advice. I appreciate it so much. Someone living differently, and it's making a difference in the workplace. I met another Christian earlier in the week who has very strong community links in London. And he's thrown himself into the challenge of addressing the knife crime epidemic in London. He wants to make a difference because God's given him an opening. I also met a woman in Southampton who opened her home to 28 people this week on Wednesday to invite them on a journey with Jesus. She happens to be my wife. And we're really excited about the Alpha course in our home. So there are just a few ideas, a few pictures of what life can be like when God is at the steering wheel and he's stepped in to take charge. So we're going to look at these two pictures that Jesus gives us to unpack that image. First of all, the image of salt. He says, you are the salt of the earth. And the point here is live it, don't lose it, as we'll see. Now, we're going to have a little experiment here. Harry has agreed. I'll come to you, Harry, don't worry. Harry has agreed to help. Okay, Harry likes crisps. So I've got some crisps. Harry, have a crisp.
Thank you.
Okay, have a chew. Okay. It's hard, isn't it, when everybody's watching you and you're trying to chew a crisp, I know. But would you like to give us your verdict on that crisp?
It was a bit bland.
Right answer. Perfect. Okay. I remember, does anybody remember these kinds of packets of crisps? Did you know you can still buy them? You can. I discovered late last night in Tesco. Okay, here's my magic little packet full of salt. It's going to go, oh, look at that. Look at that. Okay, Harry, have another crisp. Okay, sound really enthusiastic after this. Okay. Oh, that's gone down so much easier. Okay, how was that?
Much better.
Much better. You can have these as your reward. Thank you very much. That's great. Yeah, flavor enhancing. Absolutely. That's one of the things that salt does. But let's think about another thing that salt does. Oops, that's not what was meant to happen. If you're a meat eater, how do you fancy tucking into that for your Sunday lunch? A nice piece of slightly rare brisket. It looks good, doesn't it, for carnivores? But then how about tucking into that a whole pile of rotten meat? Not so appetizing. Among Jewish rabbis, and actually in other parts of the New Testament, the image of salt has these two kind of connections. It's about preventing decay, thinking about meat there, and it's about enhancing flavor. Harry and his crisps. It's both of those. So Jesus is saying that when God steps in and takes charge in our lives, that is like we were looking at last week, when we start to live with those beatitudes, those beautiful attitudes of humility and gentleness and knowing our need and longing for good things, and so open our lives to the reality of God in them, when we start to live that way, Jesus is saying, there's a big impact on the world around us. You are the salt of the earth. In other words, the stuff that makes society rot, injustice, selfishness, division, dishonesty, greed, unfaithfulness, all those kinds of things, lots of others too, they will be held back when we're the salt of the earth, because salt arrests the decline. But it's not just a negative thing. More than that, when we live that way, we will make life taste better for those around us as well. There will be kindness and forgiveness and humility and joy and laughter and community and worship and purpose and meaning. And the poor will get lifted, and the despairing will get hope, and the excluded will find friendship, and the workers will be cared for, and the foreigner will be welcomed. Life tastes better when God steps in to take charge and we live the life that he's calling us to. But the point is, we will only make a difference if we stay different. That's what Jesus says, verse 13. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. For the Jewish rabbis in the first century, salt wasn't just sodium chloride as it is for us today. Salt was probably a deposit picked up from the edge of the Dead Sea that had some sodium chloride in and quite a lot of other rubbish as well. And so if the rain came onto your bit of, quotes, salt, the most soluble bit, the sodium chloride, would quickly dissolve out and you'd be left with a useless bit of residue. And so the rabbis used to ask themselves, when this happens, how do you get the salt back in? You can't, it's useless. Jesus is talking about the same thing. He's saying, look, if we say God is in our lives, but frankly, we're just fitting in with everybody around us, we're not different, we're not actually living by different values, we'll be useless. We won't be different. And therefore, we won't make a difference. Now, this isn't just about us all becoming stuck-up holy joes looking down on everyone. Not that at all. And it isn't about not knowing how to have fun and enjoy life. It's not that. No, it's about living humble, kind, people-oriented lives with hearts wide open to God to change us deep inside and to change the world around us. Be different. Stay different. Live it so that you don't lose it. So there's the first image, salt. But then there's a second image. You are the light of the world, Jesus says. Now, let me illustrate this for you. A couple of years ago, some of you know I like running and I go on about it a bit too much, but never mind. Haven't for a while, so I thought this is my chance for a running illustration. A couple of years ago, on the 30th of December, I did a bit of a stupid thing. Well, I thought it was a great idea, but I ran back home from Brockenhurst in the middle of the New Forest. The silly thing wasn't running back home from Brockenhurst. The silly thing was doing it in the middle of winter and starting at dusk because the forest is dark, okay, and there is not much street lighting. Anyway, I set off about 3 o'clock, and I figured that as long as I could get to Lyndhurst before it was totally dark, I'd be all right, because then the street lights would get me home. So I bombed off to Lyndhurst as fast as I could, and it was just about still light when I got there. But what I hadn't bargained for was that the bit of road between Lyndhurst and here has no street lights on at all. And when I got there, it was like totally dark. I could not see a thing. I knew that there was a path on the left-hand side of the road, but I literally couldn't see it there. The only thing that saved me was the lights, the headlights of the cars when they came by, who would just light up the curb for the next couple of minutes so I could see where I was going. Light in the darkness. I think that kind of image gets us towards what Jesus is talking about here. Because Jesus isn't talking into a kind of electric world with lights everywhere like there are in our world. He's talking into a world without electricity, where the lights of a lamp or the light of a distant city coming into the absolute darkness of light. Frankly, it could be the difference between safety and danger, or even between life and death. That's the image that Jesus is thinking about when he says, you are the light of the world. Let's just take this a little bit further. Can we just have the lights off and the curtains drawn for a minute, okay? Because you'll be very pleased to know that after I did my silly run from Brockenhurst, I learnt my lesson and decided I shouldn't do it again, and I bought myself a nice head torch, okay? You can see the head torch there. It's very bright, isn't it? Hurts your eyes if you run into me on the common when I'm running with this. Okay, so I've got my head torch now. It's very good. So there it is, safely tucked away under the bowl there. So I can now, I've got a head torch, so I'm safe to run, aren't I? I can run wherever I like in the dark, and I'll never kind of fall over again down. Sorry, this silly illustration. But the point is, that head torch is completely useless, stuffed under the bowl here. It doesn't make life better at all when it's stuck under the bowl. It only works when it's on my head, doing what it's meant to do, lighting up the world around me. And that's exactly what, we can have the lights back now if that's okay. That's exactly what Jesus is talking about here. Verse 13, he says, people don't light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In other words, there are two things from these two images that Jesus is talking about that make Christians useless. Two things. Would you agree, if there are two things that make Christians useless, this is quite important? You kind of want to hear this? I assume you don't want to be a useless Christian? I'd like a bit more sense of reassurance there. Okay. Two things that create useless Christians. Here they are. They are about losing our differentness so that we just fit in, and staying in a Christian bubble. Both of them make us useless Christians because we're no longer having the impact that Jesus talked about on the world around us. If we just keep ourselves to ourselves, stay in the holy huddle of the church where no one else can see the light, then we're not the light of the world. See, Jesus didn't say, you are the light of the church. He said, you are the light of the world. And that's a completely different deal. And of course, we can't be the light of the world if we're just stuck in the safe bowl of the church. I have to say, this is a huge challenge for me personally. When you work on the staff of a church, it's pretty easy just to stay in the safe confines of the church community. And I make lots of mistakes on this. I'm challenging me probably more than I'm challenging anybody else here. I've made a few changes the last few years, but there's a long way to go. But to be honest, my observation is that it isn't only people who are paid by the church who end up living stuck in a church bubble. It's very easy for us. It's very easy at university for Christians at university just to get stuck in a Christian clique and no longer to be the light of the world. It's very easy in our communities only to have friends who are already part of the church family, and we're lighting up the church, but we're not lighting up the world. So friends, don't be afraid of being right in the world, but be there to light it up by living in a way right in the heart of the world that strikingly contrasts with the values around you. Or as Jesus put it in the same way, verse 16, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. But did you notice where that verse landed? That they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. That's really important. Let me put it to you this way. When Jesus says we are the light of the world, it's more like we're the moon than that we're the sun. Because our light is a reflected light. The true light is God himself. And we are lights of the world in the sense that we're reflecting his light into the world. So the goal of being the light of the world is not that people look at us and say what great people we are, because to be honest, we also make our messes, let's be truthful. But the point rather is so to point people to God that they look at our lives and say how great he is. That's the point. So it's great when people say, oh, your church is great. I love it when I hear that. But that's only a tiny bit exciting. It's not enough. What I need is for people to say, your God is great, and I want to know him too. Let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. In other words, living for Jesus and speaking for Jesus are two sides of the one coin, and we cannot be the light of the world if we lose our passion for either of them. They belong together. Now, in a moment, we're going to get practical with some examples of salt and light living. I'm going to think about it individually, within wider society, and together as a church. But I wanted to play you a little video of the Bon Jovi song, We're Not Born to Follow, but I couldn't download it legally, so I'm not going to be able to do that. But you can go and look at it at the web. It's fantastic. But just stay with that phrase for a moment. We weren't born to follow. Of course, as Christians, we are born to follow Jesus, reborn to follow Jesus. But we weren't born to just follow in the sense of fitting in to the world around us. Salt and light living isn't some kind of retro thing about longing for the past and desiring to turn the clock back. No, salt and light living is about starting to live the life of the future now. Let me explain. See, God didn't create us to be bored and dull. You cannot read Genesis 1 and 2 and draw that conclusion. He didn't create us to be bored and dull. He created us to live creative, productive, relational, rich, fun, challenging, satisfying life with him. That was what he made us for. We messed it up by saying we could do it without him, and everything unraveled from there. But God has this amazing plan to put it all back together through his son, Jesus. That's what he's doing. And that's the future, because Jesus is the future. And therefore following Jesus and being salt and light as he calls us to be is about leading the way into that future. Do you see? Not stuck in the past, but leading the way into life as it's meant to be. That's what it means to be salt and light. Thinking individually, I was challenged by a church leader that I met this week who said how when she goes speaking on conferences, people, and she gets back, people are really, yeah, that's great that you did that, really, really good. But she says, the thing that really cost me in my life is the fact that I've built an open home and an open table where young adults and all sorts of others come and gather around it and we do life together. That's really where lives are getting transformed. Nobody ever comments about that. She's right. For some of us, the call about salt and life is simply about building a lifestyle of hospitality and welcome and shared life. Not just for people in the church, but mixing it with friends and neighbors around us. Letting the light shine in the darkness. Tiff and Joy Alcock have given me a nice example of this, of being able to open their home to a single mum who lives in Harefield, where our new congregation is going to be. And she's got 5 kids, and they've opened their home in order to show love to this person and help her through a period of crisis. Being different, making a difference. That's salt and light living. I've also been inspired this week by people in the church who really think about the impact on other people of their lives in the workplace. Chris Ward has a passion to build a workplace where everyone can grow to their full potential and everyone is focused on providing a brilliant service to their customers. Excellent. That's what Christian workplace life is meant to be. It's about people, serving them, seeing them come to their potential. Andy Widdock said how not swearing in his staff canteen, he never made a big deal about it, but it led to a conversation at work about why he didn't. And that gave him an opportunity to share his faith. And now, not his initiative, the others have decided to have a little swear box in the canteen. And he says the result is that actually the quality and tone of the conversation at work has changed. He was willing to be different, openly, Christianly. And it's made a difference. Lamray was sharing about a boss he once worked for who was treating staff really badly. And Lamray really needed the money at the time. But he was being treated really badly and he resigned on the spot. And a few days later was reinstated, but on the basis of a whole new set of ground rules for this manager. And that improved life not just for Lamray, but for everyone He was prepared to stand up, be different, and it made a difference for everyone. So individually, there are lots of ways we can do this. Let me just say, in the Brexit world, we need to be different. Okay, I've got my passionate views about Brexit. You've probably got yours. They might not be the same. We cannot afford as Christians to play the division game that's tearing our society apart. We have to love across this division and show that we can love. That's being different, and it can make a difference. But there's a bigger picture as well for us acting as salt and light in society. I'm going to ask Matt Bundy to come. Where's Matt? Matt's recently got elected as a councillor for Swathling and has been away at the Labour Party conference this week. What's it been like to be salt and light there, Matt?
Hello. I went to conferences in 2018 as a delegate, and it was good fun, but it was lots of stress on you. Vote this way, vote that way, etc. So I wanted to go back this year and just be a person, be a councillor, do some job training, learn about things, talk to people. I was up on the balcony on Monday afternoon, I think, which is where those of us who can't vote are. And someone came up to me who was visually quite distressed, and she was a friend of mine, and said, "Look at this link." And she showed me the link. And it was a friend of hers who was a student at Labour conference. Now that student had been selling scripts, because all the big stars, John McDonnell, Jeremy Corbyn, etc., when they give speeches, they give the speeches to the students, and the students raise money. So it's completely really nice, pure thing to do, fundraising for all the students. And this student had been badly trolled on Twitter. I thought, that's not okay. Trolled by various people go, "Oh, you're peddling the Marxist agenda," etc. But there was some of it that was directed at her. And I thought, well, who's doing something about this? So I took the video, I went up to see our press team, which was not a small journey in Brighton, because it's lots of long corridors and things like that in the venue. Found them and said, "Did you know about this?" And they said no. So they monitored the video. I took it up to regional staff and said, "Listen, this is not okay." I said, "We have a student who's one of ours who is being quite badly trolled on Twitter. She's very upset about it all." But I went further than that. I actually went and spoke to the student stall, who had had a great conference, as it was for various reasons, and said, "Are they okay?" And had a nice chat with them. I said, "Hang in there. Here's my card if you need me. Here's some money for your donation thing." And I just felt it was really important that someone said that. And then actually, when I left that stall, I ran into the student herself, who I'd not seen before that, and I tapped her on the shoulder and I said, "Hang in there. Those of us do want you here. It's great. Just ignore them," etc. But I just felt it was a really nice opportunity to try and bless other people. So, thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt, so much. And it's great that you and a number of others in the church are standing up to make a difference for Jesus in that more public way within society. And perhaps there are others that can have a vision to do that in whatever political party. But as well as the individual and the societal, this is also about our vision as a church community. In fact, I think that might have been at the forefront of Jesus' mind in the way that he actually expressed this thing about salt and light. Because as a Westerner, when I read Jesus saying, "You are the salt of the earth," I think, "Oh, I'm the salt of the earth, am I? That's nice." And when I read him say, "You are the light of the world," I think, "Oh, I'm the light of the world." But it isn't what Jesus meant. The yous are plural here. Okay, if we were Americans or Scottish or something, we'd say, "You all are the salt of the earth. You all are the light of the world. You together are called to be salt and light." I spoke to a church leader from Cardiff on Wednesday. A while back, he became pastor of a fairly large, successful church in Cardiff, and it was a church with a history. It was doing okay. They did good services. But God gave him a vision for change. What he noticed was that, they had a good preacher, services were good, people used to travel across the city to come to the services, that was great. But it was as if they didn't really notice the city that they were traveling across to come to church. It was almost as if the city existed to be a kind of dormitory for the church. And God spoke to him and said, "That isn't really the right way round. No, the church is called to serve the city. Wake up, see what's around you." And they began a journey of change, which has seen many, many people reached for Jesus. Many lives changed as they've welcomed the refugees, reached out to young people, served the poor, created community, shared the good news. We're on a journey a bit like that as a church. And we're beginning to see the impact Ruth, who leads a number of our social action projects, said to me during the week, we can see evidence of our salt and light best when we hear it from non-Christians. They actually like us, want to be our friend, and even volunteer on our projects in our building. They pray respectfully with us, even though they don't get it, because they trust us as people. It's awesome, she said. And you heard earlier from Alison about the work welcoming internationals. Similarly exciting and thrilling and significant for our city. God is already doing so much here. And it is awesome. But what if he wants to do so much more? What if he wants to do so much more with us individually? What if he wants to do so much more with us together? What if this is just the beginning? What would Southampton be like if every one of us saw our everyday lives, our homes, our relationships, our workplaces as God's gift to us and the context in which he's called us to make a difference for him? What if that was our first prayer when we woke up every morning? Think how the world was changed when Jesus took hold of 12 unlikely people and changed the whole Mediterranean world in a generation. What could he do with the hundreds of people that come here at Above Bar every Sunday if we embrace that vision and said together we're going to make a difference in our own lives? But as a church, what if we dreamed of a time when every hour of every day of every week, this building was full of people from the city experiencing love, being served, experiencing church community, and being offered a bridge to come to know Jesus for themselves all the time? It's great that it's happening already, but what if it was happening all the time? What if that vision were multiplied into the east and beyond into other parts of the city? And what if hundreds of us began to invest sacrificially, invest our time, our money into making that dream a reality? What if we did? Remember I said at the beginning, if we really take this message to heart, our lives will not be the same afterwards, and nor will our church. What if we were to hear from the lips of Jesus this thrilling, life-transforming, radical vision that he wants us to be deeply different in the way we live and the values by which we live as we put him at the center of everything. And he wants us to be brave enough to do that in the full notice and knowledge of our city, in relationships with our community, so that the light can shine, not in the church, but in the world, in the city. What if we were willing to give up small ambitions and to see the reality that the kingdom of God is powerful, and so invest our lives to become people for the city, a church for the city, living radically God-centered lives so that we make a profound difference here for the glory of Jesus. That's Jesus' vision for Above Bar. Are we going to be bold enough to embrace it? As the band come up, let's just pray together. You are the salt of the earth. But don't let the saltiness be lost. You are the light of the world. So let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Help us, Lord, to take this message to our hearts and live in dependence on you and in openness to your Spirit, lives which are so radically and beautifully different that we cannot help but make a profound difference to the city where you've placed us. We pray so that you would be glorified among us. Amen. Thanks, Chris.